Okay, so I'm going to talk about letting coriander, lettuce, cilantro, lettuce, and some of your other vegetables and herbs go to seed. So these aren't ripe, but I wanted to show you. This is coriander. It's a spice. It'll actually turn woody when it's ripe, but I wanted to show you. They're not quite ripe yet, but this is actually, coriander is the seed for cilantro. So what happens, I'm pretty sure it's around 85 degrees, I can't remember, but when the cilantro gets to be that temperature, it's going to change from cilantro to coriander. I mean, it's the same bush, but it looks different, same plant. So instead of these well-known cilantro leaves that you see, you're going to get what looks more like a carrot leaf, like that, which is for the coriander. So it completely changes. So once it bolts, is what you call it when it goes to seed. Once it bolts, typically you're not able to harvest that herb or the lettuce like you were before. I know with lettuce, when it bolts, it tends to go bitter. So while you still could eat it, you may not like it. With the cilantro, when it bolts, you lose the large cilantro leaves. I've got a couple down here, but I'd be hard pressed to make a whole bunch of cilantro like a recipe would call for now that it's gone to seed. So in a couple, it's probably less than a week away. Some of these are already starting to get a brown tinge to them. These are gonna drop. I have thousands and thousands of seeds right there. So I don't plant cilantro. I haven't for a couple of years. It grows on its own because I let it go to seed, and then once they get ripe, they're gonna drop. They'll fall into the soil, and as soon as the conditions are good next year, it's gonna grow. And here's the thing that I found about letting seeds over winter and grow. We call them volunteers a lot of the times when we don't intend for them to grow. Last year, I had a watermelon plant that was a volunteer that we got 20 large watermelons off of it. Every time I've tried to grow a watermelon intentionally, I'm lucky to get one large watermelon. And I was thinking about this because this year we have the same thing with the pumpkins. I already have 7 or 8 pumpkins on my pumpkin vine, but it's a volunteer. And so when it's a volunteer, it tends to grow when the conditions are good, which is sometimes before we might do it ourselves. So how that ties into this with the cilantro and with your lettuce and whatnot is you're gonna be ahead of the game. These seeds are gonna drop and they are gonna start to grow as soon as the conditions are right, which is about the time, if not a little bit before, the stores or the nurseries are actually putting out their cilantro transplants, which I've never bought cilantro that way. I wouldn't. But with this, next year I'm gonna have more cilantro than I know what to do with. And I actually grow it in a couple of the boxes. But the other thing is, in 2 weeks, once these seeds have dropped, I'll be able to use this box for tomatoes. I already have tomatoes coming up in here. They're struggling right now because they're not getting the sun that they want, but that's gonna go away in 2 weeks and they'll be fine. And I'll completely cut back the cilantro or the coriander. I'll probably give the actual plant to the chickens once the seeds drop. But the other great thing is, all day long, the bees are off it now, but all day long, the bees are on this working it. And if they're on this, they're on the other plants as well. Your tomatoes they don't really need bees. I know a lot of us think you need bees for tomatoes. Tomatoes wind pollinate. So while a bee would pollinate it as well, it doesn't need to be pollinated by a bee. But other things out here, pea plants, which are done now, my peppers, some of the other things. Actually, I don't know about the peppers. I'll have to look into that. But there are things out here that need a pollinator, such as a bee. So I have a bush out here that is gonna flower here really soon to attract bees. I've got this, I've got honeysuckle. All over my yard, I've planted what I could consider just pollinator plants. And they're there just to draw the bees into the yard. But this is like a 3-purpose plant right here. So my cilantro started out because we love cilantro. We cook with it all the time. Then I'm letting it go to seed or bolt, and that is basically planting next year's harvest. And it's gonna be much, much more than what I had this year. And then afterward, I can feed the leftover stalks to the chickens in moderation. They like that. But it's also acting as that pollinator for now. So you can get so many different purposes off one plant, but that's what it means to let it go to seed or to bolt. Your lettuce does the same thing. So I do that with my lettuce. And typically it goes not when peak air temperature hits the certain temperature. It's when the soil temperature hits, because we've already hit 100 here. It's when the average temperature reaches a certain point of the mid 70s to mid 80s, your plants are going to start to bolt, your lettuces and herbs. So that's about cilantro and your plants bolting and going to seed. But if you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the comments below. I'm also curious to see what you let go to seed in your garden. Let me know what you've done, what works, any feedback, because I'm still learning this too. So I'd love to hear some of your successes and maybe your opportunities for improvement as well. So follow us, and thank you.